As a vehicle owner, what is a more important metric to you? A lower cost of overall ownership or a more reliable, longer lasting vehicle? That's what we're going to talk about in today's video because I think Subaru of America might be shooting themselves in the foot, sacrificing long-term reliability of the vehicle in the hopes of showing a lower cost of ownership and attracting more buyers. As time progresses, vehicles are only getting more and more complex. With that added complexity, vehicles are getting more expensive, both in upfront purchase price and in upkeep prices. Now, a lot of manufacturers, including Subaru, have tried to reel back costs to show a lower ownership cost overall to attract buyers. Now, one thing that hasn't changed with this progression of newer technology and more complex systems is general maintenance items needing periodic maintenance. Periodic maintenance has not become a thing of the past. Anything mechanical will need maintenance, and new vehicles are no exception compared to older vehicles. Yes, they can go longer between these periodic maintenance intervals, but they do still require them, although a lot of manufacturers pretend like they don't need to anymore. Subaru is one that has quickly started adopting this philosophy. Now, we first saw this philosophy in the luxury brands over the last 20, 30 years. We saw BMW, Mercedes, Audi, all of the German brands, and some of the higher-end Japanese brands like Lexus start to adopt this, let's say, no longer necessary service plan, where things like transmissions no longer need to be serviced. They're a sealed unit with a lifetime fluid. Now, we all know that that is absolutely not true. There will always be breakdowns of that fluid with heat cycles and time, as well as the components that it encapsulates. Oil gets dirty, transmission fluid gets dirty, gear oil gets dirty, brake fluid gets dirty. All of these fluids get dirty, they break down, heat cycles, time, age, wreak havoc on them. They need to be refreshed, they need to be renewed, they need to be replaced. But a lot of dealers and manufacturers think that, well, we don't really need to do that anymore. It's a lifetime fluid. Now, when they define lifetime, there's differences in opinion. A manufacturer's lifetime is their estimated life of the vehicle, which normally nowadays is about 100,000 miles. Whereas on the other hand, a lot of consumers think a lifetime on a vehicle is 250,000 miles plus, which I totally agree with. Modern vehicles are built much better. There's much better engineering, much better manufacturing processes, and much tighter tolerances. These cars do way better in long-term reliability than the predecessors. Cars of the 1960s, 1970s, were good to make it to 100,000 miles, would not be completely worn out front to back. Cars nowadays can routinely get 200,000 plus miles fairly easily with minimal breakages, minimal breakdowns. It's a completely different world. The fluids are better, the engineering's better, tighter tolerances, better materials. Everything has made this possible. But again, you still need to service your vehicle. So with that kind of a preliminary rant out of the way, let's get down to the meat and potatoes of it, which is the Subaru official periodic maintenance guide. This is for a 2020 model. Now we're going to go through really quickly all of the points, and we're going to talk about what I think is perfectly fine, normal, what they have taken away that should still be there, and maybe some things they've stretched out probably too far. So we're just going to go down the list. I'll try to put it up here in the top corner as we go along so you guys can follow along with me. I'll try to also link down in the description below this exact chart. So first off, we've got engine oil. Now they want 6,000 miles, 6-month oil changes. Now synthetic engine oil is much better than the conventional as far as longevity is concerned and the additives to prevent breakdown, etc. But I believe 6,000 miles is a wee bit too long. I stick with 5,000 mile oil changes. It's very simple to keep track of it. 5,000 miles, every 5,000 miles on the 5,000. So if I'm at 105,000 miles, I change my oil. If I'm 110,000 miles, I change my oil, etc. It's very easy to keep track of. I don't have to worry about window stickers. It's just very easy to handle. Now, with these shorter oil change intervals, I don't notice as much oil consumption as, say, someone that goes longer. I do think that the longer interval on oil changes has made the oil consumption issue a little more pronounced than it was when we were doing 3,000-mile oil changes. So between the higher service interval mileage, the lower tension oil control rings, and the lightweight synthetic oil, the oil consumption has been more noticeable and more of an issue across all of the Subaru models. So personally, I do shorten that up, 5,000 miles, 5 months. Now next we've got the engine oil filter. That's the same as the engine oil. We're going to replace both at the same time on the maintenance schedule. Next up we got spark plug. Spark plug can replace every 60,000 miles. I can totally agree with that. Now a lot of people think that we should go longer on spark plugs, especially using the higher end iridium spark plugs, go to 100,000 miles like other manufacturers do. But I see some wear at 60,000 miles on some. Some look still like they could go to 100,000 miles, but as cheap as spark plugs are, about $10 a piece times 4, and it being about a 30-45 minute service DIY, if you're proficient, there's no sense in not changing them early or often. Next up, we've got the drive belt. Now, the drive belt does not have any replacement on here as a scheduled replacement. It's just an inspection every 30,000 miles or 30 months. Now, I would say a good rule of thumb is to replace the serpentine belt every 60,000 miles. That's where I see they start to get bad. Now, the newer belts, again, are much better than the older V belts that we had, so you can get more mileage out of them, but again, they don't always wear uniformly across every single car and every single climate, so you do need to inspect the wear on it and judge accordingly for the replacement. But again, 60,000 miles is a pretty good metric for that serpentine belt. Next up, we've got the timing belt. Now, that is still set for replacement at 90 months or 90,000 miles for the STI, which is the only car that had the timing belt, which is no longer with us, unfortunately. So we don't have any more timing belts. It's all timing chains, and all the timing chains are lifetime. I do not recommend doing any kind of periodic maintenance as far as replacing your timing chains on your newer F-Series engines. It is not required. The only time you really need to worry about your timing chains or if you have a rattle. If you have a tensioner that is not tensioning correctly or a guide, you'll hear that rattling in the front of the engine. That's when you need to address it. But as far as periodic maintenance, things that you need to do, you definitely don't need to go in there and worry about replacing timing chains at any given mileage or date. Next up, we've got fuel lines and the fuel system, connectors, all that. That's an inspection thing. Again, there's no interval for replacing that. I agree with that. So below that now is the fuel filter. Now, the fuel filter used to be something that was very easy to service. It used to be in the engine bay of Subarus. It was a 3-year, 36,000-mile replacement. Just easy to do, easy to access. 2 fuel lines, popped it out of its little cage that held it against the strut tower, and you were good to go. Subaru has made that more difficult now because now the filter is internal to the fuel pump module in the fuel tank. So you have to take the back seat out of most Subarus, pull the access cover, take the lock ring off, pull the whole assembly out, and for the most part, you've got to disassemble the assembly because there's 2 filters. There's one made into the actual block of the fuel pump module at the bottom, and then there's the good old sock filter on the bottom of it. Now, I've done a video in the past on replacing that internal filter on a 2014 3.6R Outback. It's really not necessary. Fuel is so much better refined. Unless you know you've got contaminated fuel, there's not really a reason to go in there and mess with that. Normally, you get the life of the fuel pump in the module out of the entire assembly where you don't need to go in there and replace the filter separately from it. Now, again, back in the day, the filter was much smaller, so it meant it did not have as much filtration to it, but it's just one of those things where it's too aggravating really to get at to be worth worrying with. Next on our list, we got the air cleaner. Now that's the air filter for the engine every 30 months or 30,000 miles. Completely agree with that. Excellent recommendation. Cheap, easy service to keep your engine running optimally. Now below that, we go to the engine coolant, which we have a total disagreement on. Subaru says that the first replacement should be done after 11 years or 137,000 miles, and then done every 6 years or 75,000 miles afterwards. Now, I don't believe in that at all. I know that these coolants are now much more stable break down much less and have the rust inhibitors and things in them they need to last for that kind of service. But the problem is when you do a service interval that is that long and that stretched out, people completely forget to and neglect to do it. Now, we saw this issue when GM introduced the Dex-Cool coolant, the Orange Death, where they said, you know, you don't need to replace it for 10 years, 100,000 miles. Well, people completely just forgot to replace it at all. And then it became highly acidic and corrosive, and it ate lower intake gaskets, ate intake manifolds on the Vortec V8s and on the V6 engines, and it was just a nightmare. So yes, it's nice that we have these longer lasting coolants, these longer service intervals, but the problem is that people completely forget about and neglect to service these systems because of how long and drawn out they are. So as a counterpoint to that, I would say 8 years, 80,000 miles is plenty of life on that initial coolant charge before doing a service. Go ahead, drain it out, replace it, put you a fresh thermostat in there. You might as well because you got the system open. It's 30, 40 bucks for a thermostat. Why gamble on a thermostat going out after you've drained the coolant and put new coolant in? Just go ahead while you're in there and knock it all out at once. Again, continue to service it at the 6th year or 75,000 miles after that. But I would say 8 years, 80 is plenty for that initial service. 11 years, 137,000 miles is just kind of ludicrous. Again, people are just going to forget about it and neglect to do it. Next on the list, we've got clutch operation. That's an inspection point. There's no set interval for clutch replacement. It all depends on how much you drive, what kind of style of driving, and how good you are in a manual transmission as to how much clutch life you do or do not get. So next on the list is manual transmission gear oil. We have 2 listings for BRZ and then all other models. Now, there is no replacement on this maintenance schedule at all, and I completely disagree with it. It says inspection only. In a Subaru manual transmission, especially, the gear oil is even more vital because not only does it lubricate the transmission gears, it lubricates the front differential and the center differential, all housed in the same unit. That gear oil is doing triple duty compared to a regular transmission in a rear-wheel drive or front-wheel drive vehicle. Well, front-wheel drive does have the final drive in there, but anyway, it's still doing a lot of work. So it needs to be changed regularly. The old 3-year 36,000 mile or new 3-year 30,000 mile would be optimal for that. Gear oil is cheap, transmissions are expensive. Change your gear oil and extend the life of the manual transmission front and center differential. There's no point in not doing it. So next up, we probably have the most controversial thing on the maintenance list here. And probably the most controversial thing Subaru has ever told their vehicle owners in the last decade or so, and that is regarding the CVT fluid and the fact that it is a lifetime fluid and to never service it, only inspect it. Aside for, at the end here, we've got notes 2 and note 7. Correction on the CVT fluid note, that's note 4. When the vehicle is frequently operated under severe driving conditions, with 2 more asterisks behind it, CVT fluid should be replaced every 24,855 miles or 40,000 kilometers. So we've got all these different wild, for whatever reason, numbers and mileages and recommendations. Just stick to it, service it frequently, always, no matter what your conditions are. Service the fluid, it needs to be replaced. It's very weird, per se, how they define the severe aspect of it and why normal usage is lifetime, never touch it, but when it's severe duty, replace every 15,000 miles. It seems a very odd disconnect. So again, as far as servicing your CVT fluid, I know it's an expensive fluid. It is not a very easy service to do. And a lot of you have noticed that Subaru dealers just do not want to take your money for this service. A lot of the times they flat out refuse to do the service work, which blows my mind that a Subaru dealership would turn away anyone's money for anything. But 3 years, 36,000 miles, or 3 years, 30,000 miles is still the recommended interval last I checked with Subaru of Japan. And it's just a good rule of thumb to ensure the longevity of your CVT. Now, I think a lot of the issues with CVTs have been associated with this lifetime fluid and the lack of maintenance of the fluid because, you know, the fluid is still in there to hold hydraulic pressure. It's still picking up metal particulates from the chain wearing on the variators. It's picking up friction material from the torque converter clutch locking and unlocking, that stuff accumulates. It gets dirty. That fluid is going to get dirty. It's going to break down off heat cycles, and it needs to be replaced. It needs to be renewed. There's no way in the world you can claim it's lifetime fluid. It just doesn't work that way. Now below that we've got ATF, and this is for the BRZ because it still has the conventional automatic transmission, and it says to replace it every 66 months or 66,000 miles. That's a weird interval. I don't know why they picked that. Why not just go 6 years, 60,000 miles, or 3 years, 30,000 miles? I don't know why 66 months and 66,000 miles was their interval. I'm sure Toyota said, hey, you're going to tell them to service their transmission, but whatever. Next, we've got the front and rear differential gear oil. Again, it says to inspect only and not to replace, which is absolutely ludicrous. Again, as we talked about with the manual transmission gear oil, your rear differential is no different. Metal picks up in that fluid. It gets dirty. It breaks down. Lots of heat cycles. Replace it. It's cheap insurance. Fluid is cheap. A rear differential is not. Funny enough, though, on the BRZ exclusively, it says replace every 4 years or 60,000 miles. But as far as every other Subaru model on the maintenance, it just says inspect, not to replace. But there is a note 3 on here, and note 3 says, again, under severe duty, replace it every 15 months or 15,000 miles. All right, guys, just stick with me. I know we're long-winded here, but this is very important to the life of your vehicle. I'm very passionate about this because I hate seeing people have issues with their cars, high expense repairs due to the lack of maintenance. Spending a couple dollars here and there to save thousands in the long run. Maintenance is well worth the investment. So moving on, brake lines and your parking brake, service brake operation. Of course, that's an inspection only. You want to make sure you don't have any leaks from your system. Make sure that your brake pads, all that good stuff, are in good order and condition. Brake fluid. Now, brake fluid is a big one. So many people, Dateline 2020 investigations, for the mechanic scams, a lot of people think that these fluid replacements are a bunch of baloney and that you don't need them. That is absolutely not true. Yes, there's a lot of bad mechanics out there that will scam you for services they do not perform, but these services still are needed. Brake fluid especially is a vital safety component of your vehicle. Every 30 months or 30,000 miles, flush the brake system. Now, brake is a hydroscopic fluid. It absorbs water. So just humidity in the atmosphere, etc., can accumulate in the brake fluid. When you get water, when you get moisture in a hydraulic system, you lessen the efficiency of that hydraulic system. Also, that trapped moisture in the brake fluid starts to corrode the internal components of your braking components. So your brake lines, the hard lines inside of your calipers, your wheel cylinders, all that stuff starts to get rusty. That's why that brake fluid starts getting dark and dingy and black and brown. You get little bits of rust and particulates and stuff suspended in it. It's just bad for your entire braking system. Your brakes aren't as efficient, aren't as effective when you go to slam on them to stop from running in the back of somebody. New fluid performs better than old fluid. It's cheap. It's insurance. Replace that brake fluid. Next, we've got the disc brake pads, rotors, etc. Of course, inspection there. We've got wheel bearings. As long as you don't hear a roaring, basically, and your wheels aren't wobbly when you jack up the car and move them side to side, top to bottom, you're good on that. Rotating and inspecting the tires. Of course, every oil change, you want to rotate and inspect the tires. So every 5,000 miles when you're getting that oil change, go ahead and rotate your tires. Check them for nails, check them for punctures, check for any kind of uneven wear. If you've got issues, go get an alignment. You don't want to wear your tires out prematurely. Tires are not cheap nowadays, and they're not getting any cheaper. And last on the list, on this maintenance list, is the HVAC system filter or your cabin air filter. Replace it annually. It's cheap. Replace it. So many times I see AC performance issues from people where they're, man, it's not getting cool in here. I'm not feeling any pressure out of my vents, and it's due to a clogged up, neglected cabin air filter. There's tons of leaves and dirt and pine needles and debris in it. It's cheap. Replace it. That's the air you're breathing in the car. It filters out a lot of junk, especially if you're like me and have a lot of allergies and are sensitive to pollutants and pollens and things like that. It's worth it to get in there and change that cabin air filter, especially on modern Subarus where it's a very simple drop the glove box and pull it out kind of service. In the older Subarus, you had to disassemble half the dash to get in there, but it's not really a concern on the modern Subarus. They figured out an easier way to get in there and service that filter. So guys, there you have it. Subaru's official maintenance guide and my corrections to it. Take them or leave them. It's up to you. It's your car at the end of the day. You can take my recommendations and follow them, or you can continue to follow Subaru of America's. Will it make a huge difference in the long run, the longevity of your vehicle or issues you have? Who actually knows? I just know that I would rather spend the money on the maintenance to prevent a catastrophic failure or a large repair bill in the future. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Do you agree with my recommendations? Do you think I'm doing too much servicing to vehicles? Do you think Subaru has it more right than I do? Let me know your thoughts and feelings down in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you all in the next one.